This video addresses sensitive topics, including depression and suicide, which may be triggering for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. If you or someone you know is struggling, seek professional help immediately or call a friend. This content is not suitable for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'm not a mental health professional, and my opinions expressed are my own. Remember, you are not alone and help is available. Welcome to My Interesting. Today, we are going to talk about depression. Such an interesting topic, and I thought, why not film it while we are struggling with a whole bunch of stress and in the process of adjusting my antidepressant dose to get some of those real emotions firsthand. So, what is depression? Depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness or a loss of interest. It's also called major depressive order or clinical depression. It affects how you think and you feel and you behave, and it can lead to a variety of different emotional and physical problems. There's no single cause of depression. It can occur for a variety of reasons, and it has many different triggers. For some people, an upsetting or stressful life event, such as bereavement, divorce, illness, or redundancy, and a loss of job or money worries, can be the cause. Different causes can often combine to trigger depression. The 4 types of depression are situational, biological, psychological, and existential, each of which has their own primary causes. Situational depression, for example, losing a job and experiencing financial instability, can lead to a situational depression. The external circumstances, such as loss of employment, contribute significantly to the development of depressive symptoms. Biological depression, for example, a person with a family history of depression, may be more prone to biological depression. Genetic factors and imbalances in neurotransmitters, such as serotonin and dopamine, can contribute to the development of these depressive symptoms. Psychological depression, for example, childhood trauma or abuse, can contribute to psychological depression. Unresolved emotional issues, distorted thought patterns, and low self-esteem are psychological factors that can lead to depression. Existential depression, a person grappling with the existence of questions like the meaning of life and the purpose of life, may experience this type of depression. This type of depression often arises from a sense of hopelessness or disillusionment about one's place in the world. It's crucial to recognize that these examples are super simplified, and individuals often experience a combination of these. Additionally, the field of psychology does not always neatly categorize depression into these specific types, as depression is a complex and multifaceted mental health condition. At a chemical level, depression is generally linked to one of these 5 chemicals that occur naturally in our bodies. 3 are traditional neurotransmitters: serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, or noradrenaline. 2 that aren't traditional neurotransmitters are brain-derived neurotrophic factor, also known as BDNF, it's a protein, and cortisol, which is a hormone. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that contributes to the regulation of mood and sleep and appetite. This neurotransmitter plays a role in mood regulation, and low levels of serotonin are commonly associated with depression. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, a class of antidepressant medications, work by increasing the availability of serotonin in the brain. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter involved in the brain's reward system, motivation, and motor control. An imbalance in dopamine levels is also linked to depressive symptoms. Disruptions in dopamine pathways may contribute to anhedonia, which is like a loss of pleasure, and low motivation seen in depression. Norepinephrine or noradrenaline, a neurotransmitter, influences arousal, attention, and the stress response. Changes in norepinephrine levels are associated with alterations in arousal and attention. Some antidepressants, such as norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, target this neurotransmitter to alleviate depressive symptoms. Brain-derived nootropic factor, while not a neurotransmitter in the classical sense, BDFN is a protein that supports the growth, survival, and function of our brain's neurons. It plays a crucial role in neuroplasticity, which is the ability for the brain to adapt and change. It's kind of like the same vibe as calling Pluto not a planet. Reduced levels of BDNF have been linked to depression, and treatments that increase BDNF, such as antidepressant medications and physical activity, are thought to have therapeutic effects. The last one is cortisol. Cortisol is a steroid hormone produced by the adrenal glands, which are located on top of each kidney. Cortisol plays a crucial role in a variety of physiological processes in the body and is often referred to as the stress hormone, because its production is increased in response to stress. Elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol, which are produced by the adrenal glands, are often observed in people with depression. Prolonged exposure to stress and high cortisol levels may contribute to changes in the brain's structure and function. That's a lot of science, I know, but I love geeking out on the science. In my treatment of my depression, knowing all of this used to help me kind of rationalize how the pill is working, and it kind of probably also gives me a placebo effect. But over the years, my doses have increased, and I've even added new drugs. A very America approach to treating depression. The traditional first line of treatment for depression is generally an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. This is the only chemical treatment I'm going to talk about, as it's the only one I've tried so far, and it mostly works for me. There are lots of different companies making different SSRI blockers, so often if a specific one isn't working for you, your healthcare provider may have you try a few different brands, as the formulations can be slightly different, and so there may be a better fit for you. So what is an SSRI and how does it work? The function is in the name, basically. Selective serotonin, the drug seeks out the serotonin that's naturally occurring in your body. Reuptake inhibitor, the drug binds to the actual serotonin that you have in your body, and it stops the serotonin being removed by the body's drainage system. And so it gets to float around inside you longer, and you get to experience more of it. My treatment for depression, I think, subconsciously started in high school. I hated team sports, but I did enjoy the side effects, being skinny and endorphins. Endorphins act like neurotransmitters in the brain, helping the neurons talk to each other, but they also make you feel good. So for many years, as long as I was active, I felt stable enough to not need a pill for depression. But then life happens, you travel, you work, you love, you get your heart broken. And for me, the tipping point was work. I'd been in New York for about 2 years, and my job started requiring more hours of me, which meant less time to exercise. I'd always suspected at some point I'd need support for depression, so I wasn't too bothered by this. 6 years, I was on 10 milligrams of citalopram, feeling pretty good. But then I got laid off from one of my favorite jobs I ever had, and I had to up that to 20 milligrams. I then separated from my husband, 30 milligrams, and then the pandemic happened. We added Wellbutrin. At 30 milligrams of citalopram, I was getting some pretty annoying side effects, one of them being excessive sweating. And I was already a sweaty person. Hashtag WOG gloss. So I reduced that back down to 20 milligrams. And like most people during the pandemic, the need to get out of bed was kind of low. Wellbutrin is activating, which is why I feel like it basically means cocaine. It gets you out of bed within about 30 minutes of taking it. Some days during the pandemic, I didn't get out of bed. Not to eat, not to shower, not to live. But yes, for the bathroom. Otherwise, I was in bed from dawn till dusk. Sleep is one of my favorite things to do even now. I generally have a dreamless sleep, so it's just like turning off. But if I do dream, they are very vivid and often leave me waking up feeling even more tired than when I went to sleep. Vivid dreaming is a side effect of SSRIs. But fast forward 2 years, and I'm now only taking 10 milligrams of citalopram, and that's it. It feels good, but I can definitely feel the depression more. Wellbutrin is very difficult to get in Mexico, however, citalopram is quite available. Everyone describes their depression differently. For example, for me, it's kind of like a black haze that creeps into my mind if I'm not paying attention. And it can start to make me feel sad and alone and unliked by people. It's a really hard place to be in. I love my alone time, but also I sometimes get that confused with people not wanting to be around me. I don't get energy from going out and socializing. That actually drains me. But I've always said I need my alone time to recharge so I can sparkle for everyone. Even just saying it aloud, though, is one of the ways I've learned to fight off the haze. This year for me has been a very tough one. I moved to a new country whose language I don't speak, left my friends and support network in New York City, which granted isn't as far away as Australia. Unsuspectingly, I moved into a very stressful rental situation. Just I delayed construction on my building here, my house in Mexico. Once for me not being happy with the designs, and then the second time due to lack of income. Lack of income due to being laid off from my job. And then during that time, exploring the sexual harassment that I experienced at that job with a lawyer in depth. So basically reliving that whole thing and then giving myself a stressful deadline of moving out of the rental I was in to move to my land. I gave myself 2 months from moving out to building the structure that I'm currently in. Before I realized I could use my American credit card on the US version of Amazon but get supplies I needed to build the house, I was very stressed and I got to a very dark place. For the second time in my life, I was considering taking my own life. It's a scary and strange place to be in. I wasn't able to bring myself out of it. Everything seemed pointless. I did feel tired, but sleeping in that moment didn't seem to make sense. That day, what got me to ask for help was my new puppy, Penny. I looked at her and she stared at me and wagging her tail, and she's who I decided to live for that day. I then texted my therapist and he helped me remember that not only she would miss me, but a lot of my family and friends would too. That day was a bit of a turning point for me. My mind changed itself. It realized there was more important things to stay alive for. My mum insisted a year or so ago that I make a list of affirmations to wake up and think about or say every day. And if you take the time and write ones that mean something to you, you think of that meaning when you look at them and think about them each morning, for me, they actually kind of really do help. The next day, I made a new affirmation, and that lives on its own piece of paper. Choose happiness, fuck depression. If I ever feel the haze creeping in, I can look at these new affirmations and surprisingly, I can choose happiness and I can push that haze out of my mind. It's strange to realize this after so many years of taking a pill each day. Granted, it doesn't work 100% every day, but no one's ever at 100%. But it is an empowering feeling to feel your emotions change after making that decision to change them. I don't think I could have gotten to this point of self-control without getting so low. Another important part of my journey is letting myself, friends, and family know that while I may seem like a strong and confident person outwardly, I do need help sometimes. Admitting that makes me feel incredibly vulnerable, and I don't like it at all. So if I ever do ask you for help or let you know that I'm not okay, that's what's going on. That in itself is another way that I feel stronger, though. Showing your vulnerability and getting that support from your friends and family is much better than any drug. So what's next? I'm super excited to be in my new home finally and get this to a point that I'm happy with, and start applying for new jobs in earnest again. Having these super stressful items removed from my life, I'm keen to see if I'm finally able to start being in a better, more consistent place living here in Mexico. I would love to not have to take any antidepressants, but if the last week has shown me anything, I'd rather take the pill than be in such a horrible, dark place again. And if you ever feel like you're in a depressed or helpless place, know that there is always someone out there who loves you and will miss you if you aren't here. Ask for help, as people always will help.
The Pacific coast of Oaxaca. Find your escape.